Justin and I just got done talking to Chadd Olesen, CEO and founder of AVRL, talking about a couple things: change management, automation, and how to propel your mid-size brokerage into a powerhouse. The reason why Chadd is qualified to talk about some of these things is because he's working with the top brokerages in our industry today. Let's get to the show.
Chadd, you run the most mysterious company in logistics, but your background's not logistics.
Yeah.
Like, tell us how you kind of got intertwined into this crazy industry.
I'll try and leave as many company names like off the table, but
No worries.
The largest retailer in the world introduced me to a massive intermodal company. And kind of like if you like go before that, my CTO and I built a bunch of BMWs in car technology. What had happened was a technology company tried to buy us, and SAP gave us money to go and not be sold. They essentially wanted us to go to market. And to go to market was to connect disparate systems. So if you look at companies like an ExxonMobil or a Nike or a Daimler, a lot of times the ERP system doesn't talk to the WMS, which doesn't talk to the TMS, and it creates like massive problems.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So we started doing work like that. We got involved in oil and gas brokerage. We've done a ton of work for most of those top oil and gas brokerages. They end up operating in this thing called Intercontinental Exchange. And Intercontinental Exchange is called ICE, and it's a chat system. And so if you worked for BP and you worked for Shell, you might swap and you do it via chat. Well, what ends up happening is you have these oil and gas traders that make millions, then taking almost like a codified language and entering into the ERP system. So we started doing that for a lot of these oil and gas companies. Ended up meeting this retailer, and the retailer introduced me to JB Hunt. That was kind of like our intro into transportation at all.
It's awesome.
And I think that like a lot of startups, when they come into transportation or logistics, they start with like the smallest players and work their way up.
Yeah.
Like our first customers were top 10 logistics companies.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah, like when you think of like our
Silver
tooling,
platter.
Well, I worked in, I was in Arkansas for a couple of years, and JB Hunt was the king. I mean, it was one of the biggest employers around there. Obviously, Walmart's got a halfway decent name, but they were one of the biggest employers in the area.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think that the brokers and carriers in that region, it's almost kind of like this like little like friend group. They go golfing together, and so we got introduced to one, and then to another, and then to
awesome.
another.
That's great.
And a lot of our original growth was organic. We knew we were making impact, but it was also because when we came into that space, it was like February 2020. Like we like caught the market on its way up.
Sure.
Never been through a cycle before, but we started getting all these inbound from a lot of the like larger logistics companies who were friends or their friends worked there. And we never touched mid-market. Like my entire goal at the beginning was like, don't touch mid-market. Like let's go after like the top 100 3PLs and try and solidify that placement. That's actually what led to the marketing piece of like us not marketing and advertising.
Sure. You don't need to.
Yeah, and we felt like if we started to do that, then all we're going to do is breed competition in versus allowing us to go and focus on like siloing use cases. So like spending time with like spot bidding, spending time here, spending time here, spending time here. What ended up happening was we probably came out like 3 years ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up happening with that no marketing strategy.
That's awesome.
So you got teed up by some big players, Fortune 500 companies. Did you immediately come out and you were able to automate like what? You were doing just back office processes, or what was your sweet spot for the transportation industry?
So with transportation, what ended up happening is we were working on, so my background's like voice technology. And what we were actually doing it with Honda and East Liberty. What ended up happening was like they wanted to speak out a process and then find a flag in a default. So like 1.36 cars that leaves the lot is the same. That's problematic from like a schematic perspective. They fly all these like SMEs all over the country to essentially identify faults in the electrical system. But if you could literally speak out a process, have that system write all the code for it, you could plug it into the ECU and it would flag the fault. And this is what we were going into market with. We were like, we can do this, and we can do maintenance inspections and help companies identify those problems early or easier. And that's what I actually went into that first logistics company to sell. And they were like, this is great. Could you automate our spot bidding? And we were like, I don't know what spot bidding is,
Yeah,
you know?
maybe.
Yeah.
And then we looked at it and we were like, oh my gosh, from surface, it looks like a super easy problem to solve.
Yeah.
But it's actually more complex, and a lot of people have tried to solve it with robotic process automation, tools like UiPath, Automation Anywhere, etc. The challenge is that these web pages change so frequently that your RPA ends up just being broken all the time if you do it. So then we were like, well, maybe we start focusing on web-based automation. And that's really what really pushed us forward. Was we were like, we're going to focus on this as an industry for time being. Granted, we might go after other industries, or we work with some shippers. Like, we have other legs that we're going to go after, but right now we have a really good opportunity to impact transportation. That's what we're going to be.
So obviously tech, automation, bots, AI, huge hot topic in logistics and transportation. You fell into, by accident somewhat, the spot bid automation.
Yeah.
And that's in 2020?
That was in 2020, yeah.
How has your growth been, and how has it transformed from 2020 over the past 4 years?
I mean, it's massive. When we look at our original team, we probably had 8 or 9 people working on it at AVRL during that time. We're about 120-ish people right now, give or take.
It's awesome, man.
And
Congrats.
thank you.
It's really cool.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and we're really trying to grow responsibly, right? And so
You have to be.
when we go to our website, it's oh yeah, AVRL, and they bring on 18 customers per year. Well, if we're successful with them, then that's actually a solid growth metric for us. And so our investors have been super happy with it. We're happy with it, but it allows us to be sustainable in a growth pattern, giving our customers top-notch service. My number one thing right now is to help customers with change management.
Yeah.
You guys have implemented technology.
Yeah.
Implementing technology is easy. The change management on your culture of your implementation is super hard.
We funny story, we just implemented a new TMS, I would say about 18 months ago. And I feel like we're just now hitting our stride with getting everybody, well, not everybody, but majority of people on that right track. One thing I was going to ask is, we talked about the growth, kudos to you guys for crushing it. What is the main problem that you're solving for these shippers or 3PLs? What is the main problem that you're solving?
I think that there are main challenges that we're solving.
Yeah.
I know not everyone who watches this is going to agree with what I think.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that the companies who automate spot bidding, maybe automate tender acceptance for contracted freight, automate other things, they then get to spend all of their time with their shipper. And so it depends on the type of 3PL or carrier on what the problem that we're solving is. One, I'm going to give our customers more at bats, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that your win percentage is going to go up, probably going to go down, because we should be looking at more volume. But what ends up happening is, for the first time ever, what you get to do is you get to run network strategy, right? So before, if you look at a cradle to grave model or a split model, pod-based model, you're really buying for your own pocketbook as a broker versus an organization, right? And if we're trying to be competitive on an RFP, maybe we're okay with lower margin and higher volume from the spot market to build capacity in a specific market or zone, etc. And so there's a couple of plays that we're after. One, we want to give you more at bats, right? And I think that that's super important. The only way to really do that is automation, unless you're going to staff a ton of people on these boards.
Well, I think it's you have a decision to make, right?
Yeah.
It's either you staff a ton of people or you look at automation to perform that service.
Yeah. And another thing is we're trying to provide better data visibility. Yeah. We want to make sure that you're able to see what are you bidding on? Why are you bidding on it? Why are you not bidding on it? What was the opportunity lost from not participating? We end up seeing all of these unique things that happen where you didn't bid on something under 10,000 pounds. Well, what if fuel is really high? Would that change the way that you're thinking about bidding? And I think when you look at automation and what it does for the opportunity for a broker to start participating more, we want to help them identify trends or holes in the shipper's routing guide that we can find repeatable patterns in or repeatable business in. So you have all of that. But then at the same time, we want to go in and help reduce cost. And the reason for the cost reduction is, If we can automate a specific piece that you no longer have to staff, then your cost to serve goes down. So if we can exploit yield and reduce cost to serve at the same time, it creates unique pricing discretions in the market. That's ultimately what we're trying to do.
Increase revenue, reduce cost.
Yeah.
Seems like a pretty good model. I like that. Yeah.
Sounds made up. That's impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's one thing that him and I talk about often is how do we automate some of those tasks? How do we get certain things in place? And you mentioned it earlier upstairs that not necessarily you set it and forget it, but how do you strategically make those decisions on a weekly basis? Or if you have to tweak it a little bit here or there, you do that, and you have some person be the champion or the leader of that group to manipulate that.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the industry, they look at us and they're like outsiders to the industry.
Yeah.
They don't realize that former GM of pricing at night works on our team. Some of the old BNSF pricing analysts are on our team. We have some really smart, talented people on our team. They ultimately are helping our customers look at their data, get better at data, better at reporting, better understanding where there might be opportunity, etc. Our whole goal is that a lot of the pricing tools, a lot of brokers don't know how to use the pricing tools because they were never educated on them.
Sure.
We really want to help customers understand okay, where do you actually live relative to DAT market rate? You buy above it, do you buy below it?
Yeah.
It could change based off of a lot of different things. KMA is dependent on the market, your origin, your destination, where you have active capacity.
Yeah.
And so for us, we want to we're kind of taking charge of hey, we need to make sure we're educating our customers on these items and seeing that they actually implement them. Otherwise, they're not going to be as successful with our tools.
Well, I love that education piece because I feel like not a lot of other vendors or partners out there do that. Where you're going along in the process, educating the end user on how to do this, how to manipulate some of the data, where you're able to win more spot shipments, or you're able to manipulate those rates and know the market, and eventually win more shipments.
I also think coming from, I don't think it's any secret that Brian and I came from TQ at this point, but you almost take it for granted when you're at a company like TQL and you have access to endless data, and endless support and back office that have analysts, and they crunch numbers and they can spit you back a very, very specific RFP that you will win with
30 minutes.
Yeah, companies like AVRL. Now you have almost leveled the playing field for mid-sized companies like us, small to mid-sized, I should say. But our whole mindset with technology is how do we leverage technology to do more with less headcount? That's going to allow us to grow as opposed to just hire.
Yeah.
We want to be very calculated and strategic with who we hire in terms of talent, and then retain that talent, but also use that technology to grow and give people the right resources. So, leveling the playing field allows companies like Veritas to then go and compete with the big box brokerages out there.
Yeah, and I think that every brokerage has to be mindful of how do we grow 15% year over year without just hiring more and more people.
Sure.
I don't think that automation is the end all be all for that, but it should definitely be part of everyone's strategy, and it should be an augmentation to the human. At the end of the day, we just want to help educate on our tools so that your brokers, your AEs, your pricing team can get better at buying in the market relative to your costs in the market.
Sure.
And that was why we took this whole approach of I give you more at bats, I train you on the tooling, it's your strategy. And I think that that's something that will always be core to AVRL, because if we're going to work with multiple 3PLs, multiple carriers, it has to be their strategy. It can't be my strategy, because I don't understand how you purchase relative to the market.
Sure.
I know you've had a lot of experience now, more so recently in transportation.
Yeah.
Not necessarily your background, but clearly you're familiar with the industry, with working with so many companies. 20 years ago, even when Brian and I started, it was all cradle to grave.
Yeah.
We're starting to see that take a back seat and get phased out almost.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts of the next 10 years? What does that look like in terms of how technology comes into play, but also still including that human factor?
It's interesting. I think that...
Get with that crystal ball, man.
Yeah, you have to know these answers.
I think that cradle to grave works exceptionally.
Yeah.
exceptionally good, exceptionally bad. I'll give Scott Friesen credit at Echo for that one because he's literally told me that. And I think it's so true though. Like what ends up happening with cradle grade models is like the broker or that like team ends up buying for their own pocketbook or like their own workload.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunity that's left. And everyone that we've seen enter into like our tech that runs like a split model, there's obviously going to be a fight at some point.
Sure.
But if you look at the data relative, like you buy better with automation and a pricing team running it than a broker all day long.
Yeah.
The broker makes like a gut, like just jerk reaction. Like, oh, California market's like completely trash, but maybe you booked a load that pulled an Ontario market rate, but it actually was Victorville, California zip. And you deadheaded you had someone had a deadhead 80 miles up a mountain across the desert to get there.
Yeah.
But the broker doesn't understand why the rate was generated that way. And so what ends up happening is like you get this like much more granular focus with automation and like the data on it. So I just think that like the model has to shift at some point, like with more technology coming into play. I feel like it has to.
Yeah, I think even like when you're talking about the cradle to grave and even like the broker's gut feeling to, pull the trigger, it also has to deal with, lead time or when that load was sent over or what the market is and when the holiday is coming up or whatever that looks like. So I think it puts a lot of emphasis on, the broker's experience, their gut reaction, your ability to manage decisions. And, sometimes like, I've done it a million times, but make a bad decision, when I'm in the driver's seat. So
yeah, and like you look at like TQL, like their model works for them.
Yeah,
and so I think that the model has to be worked for, like it has to be built for that brokerage and how it's going to run. I think going from like cradle to grave to split, like we've watched some of our customers go through it, and it's like terrible until it's working, and then it's good. To take like a brokerage like that though, and to move it, I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah. I feel like even since Brian and I started over 4 years, we would try one TMS upgrade, try, one rate tool upgrade, try this, try that. There are so many vendors, I feel like, that have continued to enter the space, and not necessarily a bad thing, but what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that's going to continue? Is there just opportunity here? Why so many vendors?
Why so many vendors focus on like rate?
No, just logistics in general. It's almost a dime a dozen. How do you see that evolving in the next few years? Is it going to get consolidated, or are there going to be bigger players in the game? What's that look like, do you think?
I think the bigger players keep getting bigger. I think what's going to end up happening is the barrier to entry is going to get harder and harder and harder, right? So like every cycle, you have new entrants that come in, and then like people do get consolidated out, etc. I think one of the challenging things that exists is that when COVID happened and so much technology came into the space, a lot of that technology will get ripped out, primarily because it drove cost to serve up, not down. And so what ends up happening is that the good technology that persists will stay, but it's going to create a new baseline. And so if you want to come in and now work with Dollar General, there's no spot portal anymore. It's API. And guess what? They don't even support EDI. You have to API tender. And so like what broker, like you have to have a TMS to even work with them. Same with TJX, same with Bridgestone. So like what's ending up happening is like as the shipper shifts their technology structure, the broker has to like respond to that. What's going to end up happening is it's going to pull that industry up. And then like, I do believe it's going to be much harder to create new brokerages. And so I don't necessarily know if there will be less of them. I think that the bigger players will continue to get bigger, but I think that there will just be less entrants that come in.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it earlier, but I think that the brokerages that don't keep up or don't, go with the tide on the technology side of it, I do think they're going to get left in the dust. I think there's going to be so many shippers that are out there that are going to acclimate towards the technology piece that if you don't keep up with it, you're going to be left out in the cold. So.
Yeah. the strategy that you get to run with certain technologies is interesting. And I don't believe in automating everything. Like we've looked at customers who have tried to automate like carrier sales.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the worst things you can do because you lose negotiation, right?
Sure.
And so you have to like definitely be strategic about what you want to automate, what you don't want to automate. And that might be very specific to a company. Like I'm not here to say that today every single company can be successful with automated spot bidding, because if they're not willing to like put the work in, then it's just going to fail and not work. But the companies who actually do it and put the time in and look at the data and then respond back to the data, they're ultra successful. But at some point, every single company is going to have to do it. And so what a better time to learn digital quoting freight than a down market? Because
you get more free time.
It's more free time, but like, think about like in an inflationary market, trying to adjust your rates and never have tried it before. You leave money on the table, you buy a shipment, you don't just lose a little bit of money, you lose a lot of money on it. Like, there's a lot of problems there.
I had a friend of mine who worked at C.H. Robinson for 15, I think it was like 18 years. And one of the things that he said, and we talk every now and then, probably once a year or so, but he said, and I thought it was pretty good as far as the sentiment, but it's not only the technology, it's the people behind the technology that are pulling the triggers, pulling the levers, figuring out, which way to go. And so I think, I don't think technology is going anywhere. Also, how do you implement the right people behind it to pull those levers in the right fashion?
Some of these young bucks coming into
they know
it. I mean, they're whizzes.
They know
how fast they pick it up.
We had an intern that literally came in, 6 weeks ago and picked up our TMS in like 3 days. And we're like, hold on. He's like, all you need to do is watch YouTube videos and you got it? We're good here? Like,
no, I just get it.
But he's great. Dude's great. But
I want to shift. Did you have one more thing?
My only like comment that I was going to make is that technology like is this constant evolution. And I think that, like a lot of younger people grew up with technology. And so, it may be easier to adopt. But I do believe that each broker will have to focus on analytics, like moving forward. Like, it doesn't mean every broker has to be an analyst. But I do believe that they have to be able to read data, interpret data, transform that data into action. And what we are seeing with our customers is they almost run like a carrier sales strategy meeting for the automation every week and literally go through the data and what do we want to adjust and what do we foresee happening. That doesn't mean foresee happening with seasonality trends. It could also be what's the weather impacts going to happen. What's this. And those customers who like just start to make that part of the culture, then all of a sudden it's part of it. It's not this like forced thing that you have to do and someone gets mad because you lost money on a load. Like, let's go and look at why that was the case. This is definitely an underlying reason.
I want to shift more so because I'm curious and fascinated by a few things. I've never really seen anyone throw a one-line sentence on LinkedIn and generate so much activity. So we know you're well connected in the industry. We've met it several times, connected at some events, but I want to talk about AVRL, the culture you've built, and what's next for you all. And I'd like to start with more so like your approach on not really marketing, not broadcasting the name, the brand all over social media. Where does that thought process come from? Because it's clearly successful. And where did you learn that?
I don't know where I learned it. When we were coming into transportation, we started looking at transportation. We started looking at companies that work in freight technology. And what was constantly happening was one company would say that they would do it. And then like a couple weeks later, all of the companies were marketing that way. And we're like, wow, this could be terrible for us if we marketed what we're trying to do. Because all we're going to do is breed competition. Now, there's a couple of things that happen. If I don't advertise, really hard to sell against me. If I don't talk about what we're doing, who we're doing it with, it's harder to sell against me. And so as we started to see it actually work, we were like, wow, we should double down and go like deeper into this like almost like an exclusive network that we run in. But when I started writing on, I'm pretty outspoken. And when I started writing on LinkedIn, people started texting me. And what a lot of people don't see about LinkedIn is like, I'll write this post and it will get 0 likes. And I'll get 50 people that text me, like important people in the industry that text me and are like, I love that. Like, keep doing that. And so I was starting to realize like, oh shoot, it has nothing to do with the engagement. As long as I like just keep pushing what I think, other people will connect with me on like a different level. And it was never about AVRL. I think the moment that I start like just posting about AVRL, I just like lose all of my followers.
I don't think I've ever seen you post about AVRL.
Yeah.
I think the only time I've ever posted about AVRL is like, you know, we file a patent. I'm like just pumped for my team, or like we land on Inc. 5000 like for a third time in a row. Like it's easy to get on there one time, two times, three times, like four times is harder. And so like stuff like that, where I like want my team to see like I'm proud, but we actually share a lot internally. Like we'll have a customer that wins their like, 10,000th load with the automation. They send us like this internal note that gets broadcasted internally. And so a lot of like our messaging that we have isn't like pushed out, it's pushed like in. And what we're trying, like the culture that we're trying to like drive at AVRL is I want to win. Like we don't want to lose. Like we want to win.
Yeah.
And we also believe that technology is massively underserved in transportation. And it goes back to the change management piece. Like if a broker doesn't like technology, they won't adopt it. And then it fails. And I think that there are probably some great technology companies that have come into this space and they got fizzled out or it failed, not because the technology was bad. They just couldn't get it adopted in the industry. And so what we want to do is like, we actually want to elevate the industry with more sophisticated tools. So we have some competitors in the space that we like won't mention, but like a lot of times they're trying to dumb down their tech to meet the broker. Sure. That's not what we should do. We should educate the broker to be better at using more complex technologies. So if we dumb down the problem, then that doesn't serve anyone.
No,
like,
it doesn't. I mean, two things there. I love the fact that you said we just had a broker that won their 10,000th shipment, and we want 10,000th. That's tough. 10,000.
I'm not even attempting.
They want a lot of shipments. They want a milestone of shipments. Yeah. A milestone of shipments, and you broadcast that internally, where you're happy for your customer success, because that's only going to breed a higher level of client retention. Yeah, that's awesome. And also, like from an employee perspective or a culture perspective, like getting all the people or getting the education piece, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, but educating the broker, right? And like when you talk about, the broker brings in a or some tech vendor, they're spending a couple grand a month, and then they don't use it. Like, we never really used it. Well, whose fault is that? Yeah. Right? To me, that's the tech vendor. They need to educate the broker to use their technology to have a higher level of client retention. So, yeah.
Well, like I'm going to be speaking at TIO Technovations with 3 of our customers. And the session is change management. Nothing. And I wrote to TIO. I was like, look, this is not talked about. This, like, literally, we go to like all these events, these technology events, or like TIA or like FreightWaves, and everyone's just like, it's like a billboard for that company, And I was like, I don't want to talk about AVRL. I don't want to talk about the companies. Like, what's the shit that you have to go through to get like the technology implemented? Because it sucks. Sure. But once you get it implemented and it's part of the culture, then it's great. And so I think the industry just needs to spend a lot more time talking about change management and like real conversation. Like, it fucking sucks to get your account stripped from you, because you're like, what the hell? I'm like good at buying, like I'm good at winning freight here. Yeah. And it's not the problem. The problem is that we need to be bidding as like a company, like not like you here and you here and you here. It's like, what's our strategy for our entire organization and moving it forward? Yeah.
So Justin and I know about change management, but dumb it down a little bit. What does change management mean for the listeners that are out there?
Change management, I think that there maybe is like multiple meanings for change management. What it means for me is like the change from like one process to another. I want to use like spot bidding as an example. Okay. Forever, the account rep has been responsible for bidding on freight. Yeah. And a company that you guys know like all too well, the very first time I met with the Procter & Gamble team, they were like walking us through the process, and I was like, why don't you use the competitor's rates on that portal? And he was like, there's no competitor's rates on that portal. And I'm like, click on settings, click here, click here, click here. And then all of a sudden the new column appeared and it had all of their competitors' rates on it. He had no idea, because he had adopted that portal from the person who had that account before him. Yeah. And so what ends up happening in a lot of brokerage is like your knowledge transfer, like, like knowledge is power in transportation for sure. And there is like a massive like amount of knowledge that these like brokers have.
Yeah.
However, you only know what you were trained to know or what you've learned from the market. The benefit that we have is I work with 50% of the top 100 3PLs.
Yeah.
I literally will tell you like what to do or what we want to like help you educate you on is like what we think is best, what we've seen.
Sure.
But the change management is like going from one process to another. It doesn't just happen overnight. There has to be like effort that's put into it, and it has to start from leadership. Has to be like, this is the model that we're going in now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that there's like a ton of weak leaders in transportation, but there's a ton of weak leaders in transportation. Like they decide to buy technology and then they don't do the work to like to at least try it.
Well, I think it's hard. I think it's hard to implement that, and they're gonna get met with friction and resistance from their team, and they don't want to have those conversations. Yeah. They don't want to go in and say, "Hey, listen, I know the way that you've been doing it for the past 3 years has worked, and you're doing well, but we're gonna do this." How much friction will that happen, especially with a top earner, a top broker?
Yeah.
Like, hey, listen, I get it, but we're actually gonna move to this direction.
Oh my gosh, do you know Dave Broning at NFI?
No.
He was a CH guy, brilliant, like really smart guy, and I've spent a little bit of time with him.
Yeah.
And we had this dinner that was around like TIA or something, and we were like talking about like some of the most challenging things that they have done. And he was like, I've had to fire some of my best earners because they are not willing to adopt technology or not adopt the new processes that we need. And that takes like massive kahunas to like do that.
Yeah.
But it's what's best for NFI.
A lot of courage.
Yeah. I posted about this on LinkedIn and I got so much flack. They were like, oh, people are weak leaders if you're getting rid of like your like top employees because you can't like, you're not leading them in a way that's done. Sure. And there are definitely people in this industry that are like, no, I'm not going to change. Yeah. And sometimes change management is like doing what's best for your organization long term.
Got it.
And going through these like process changes in order to do what's best for your company long term, not like current situation now.
We talk about it all the time, but like cradle to grave to, pod model or, the split model. It's like, how do we make this change? When do we do it? We were born and raised on cradle to grave, right? So that's all we know. But how do we make that change in the future? And when do we do that? And when do we rip the Band-Aid off? It's hard. So even for us, like change management is something that, we talk about very, pretty often.
Well, it's also, you're always going to have tough conversations. We've had plenty of them, especially with changing technology or processes, but communication is one thing that we can control. So being upfront about those changes that are on the horizon and laying out the blueprint on the process, the timeline, what it's going to look like, how it's going to impact that individual, those things we control. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're not blindsiding employees, and at the end of the day, if they're not on board, that's tough.
Yeah.
But we did our part. We gave them the reason why we're making that change and how it's going to impact the company. And if that's not a pill they can swallow, then spit it out.
And sometimes, like when we look at transportation, you guys fight like a lot of factors, right? Like, is our payment model like appropriate, right? Like you start automating like Spot, like who gets paid for that?
Sure.
I don't know. But what ends up happening is like a lot of like split models, appointment scheduling, like who prioritizes? Is Walmart more important than Costco? Because one's getting scheduled first all the time, right? And like if your top earner expects that they're paying,
an employee
more revenue or like more percentage of their salary, like that becomes really difficult. And so maybe it's not just like the change of like communication, the change of like transformation, but like maybe a lot of things have to change with the implementation or like the movement of like the future of freight.
Sure.
One unique thing before, we ever decided to move forward with AVRL is the conversation we had, one with Becca, but also Madison, where you all were so clear about the expectations and what the process would look like, where I almost felt like you were trying to convince us not to work with you. Is that something that's in your all's tool belt? Because we heard the expectations, but we were fully on board.
In 2021, when the market was like super good, we brought on customers that we had no right bringing on. They literally would come on and had 4 accounts and we charged them like a ton of money. And it was like, we didn't know that the industry was cyclical. So we didn't know like the strategy would change. We didn't know that there wouldn't be volume in certain accounts. Like, this is something that we had to learn.
Yeah.
And my entire goal at this point is like, if someone signs on to AVRL, fuck, we're going to give it our like best shot for it to be successful and give them the tools to be successful. But we need them to also believe that they're going to do everything. And to be honest, like when I had Rebecca talk to you, I was like, scare the shit out of them. They still want to go? Awesome, let's go. And we literally have this conversation all the time, because automation, the amount of effort that goes into automation from both sides is a lot. And the last thing that I really want someone to do is pay me money. And then like, what, we just don't work together. And I'm like, wow, thank you for wasting your time, your money. And like, we are left with nothing, because this should be a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, there's going to be days that are shit. And there's going to be like times where like, we lost money on this load. Why? Like, let's go look at that. But if we've never had that conversation up front, then I kind of look like I'm scamming the industry, and I don't want to be like that.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I think why spend the time and energy, even through the implementation process, to jump through all these hoops, and then you're not going to keep the client over 12 months or 24 months. It doesn't make sense. And I love that part of it.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've had to learn, but it's something that's like 100% in our tool belt now. Like, you talk to us, like, we're going to be like, do we, like, we actually have been meetings internally. Like, do we think that this company could be successful with us? Yes? No. We've told companies, like, maybe go try out another vendor. If it works, like, maybe it could work with us.
Sure.
But you have to have like the appetite to be like, we want to do this if we're going to do it. We have customers that have seen like insane results. We have a customer that increased net new shipment count by 300%, and they're monstrous. And it can do great things, but it takes a lot of work. Sure. And I just want people to be aware of that. And so Rebecca was like a key part. Like, if I called you and I was like, Justin, you know, you got to like think about this, you're not going to receive it the same way. But Becca's been in that seat before. Yeah. She's used our technology as a customer on that side, worked with brokers. She knows what it actually takes and what you need to be thoughtful of. She's the best person for that.
Yep. Yeah. Well, your team's uber talented. So, you know, props to you and your leadership team. It's been a great experience. We're looking forward to the partnership. Love what you're doing for the industry as a whole. Where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn.
One-liners on LinkedIn.
No, I mean, if you like go to our webpage, there's an email. So like email at AVRL. I don't actually know what it is. We have like a unique model. Like, I spend time with most of our customers, and it's primarily just to understand like what's happening in the market, like where are pitfalls, where can we get better at product, like where can we get better at understanding like the tools that we need to build. We're in like this constant evolution. And so my leadership team is like at the forefront. File a ticket, CEO is going to see it, and we'll like push it to a product owner. I think we have to be like that, because of like, this tech becomes like super crucial to someone's operations, right? Like, if it touches revenue, it's important. So yeah.
That's great. Well, Chadd, we seriously appreciate you coming in town. Maybe see you at Technovations?
Yeah, Technovations for sure. I'll be like, I'm going to speak at McLeod event, Trimble Insight, Technovation, Inland Distribution, like literally 4 weeks in a row.
Change management.
Nice. There you go. That's what it's about.
Chadd, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Chadd.
Guys.
You know, my inner circle, I expect them to be my biggest fans. I expect them to believe in me, and vice versa. I expect them to hold me accountable. I expect them to hear me out or give me advice when I need it. But your inner circle is truly your most trusted network of friends, family, you know, significant others.